And increasingly, that next generation of companies is going to be built kind of extending on that value proposition. Means you're able to distribute the products in the context of where your users are already spending time. So you're not asking users to learn a new user experience or have to go log in to get another app when they've already got dozens of apps to log into. You're kind of extending on the workflow where they already live. You're able to get value more quickly because you're able to build off of places where data already resides and folks are already actively working. And you can potentially play the role of connecting systems and create a lot of stickiness in the user workflow as part of that.
Our sponsor is Partner Insight, your AI co-pilot to grow your partnerships 3x faster. Onboard and collaborate with partners from one shared platform. Seamlessly exchange and track deals, content, and data. Use AI to automate engagements, track progress, create reports, or answer frequent partner questions. Try Partner Insight for free.
Hi Kyle, great to have you.
Yeah, great to be on.
I've been following you for a very long time on LinkedIn and also following your newsletter, Growth Unhinged, and the work you've been doing on OpenView. You've done an incredible job coining the term product-led growth in 2016. This movement just blowing up and increasing in scale, really incredible. So I'm really looking forward to discuss today how product-led growth interacts with partnerships, because I think there's a misconception that they are mutually exclusive, but I think they're not. But to kick things off, I would love to ask you, what is the latest definition of product-led growth? And could you explain like product-led growth to me as if I'm your new friend who has nothing to do with B2B SaaS? Like how would you explain it?
I joined OpenView in 2016, which is the year the firm coined the term product-led growth. It was coined by a colleague of mine, Blake Bartlett, and he was essentially looking at companies, both in our portfolio and companies that we wish we would have invested in, and they were rewriting the playbook for how to grow a software company. And I think the most useful way to describe product-led growth is to kind of emphasize what it's not. And the old playbook was we'll hire up a very big sort of outbound SDR, BDR team. They'll get a list of potential buyers in a space. They'll call them up, set up meetings, and then maybe qualify folks, hand them off to an AE. There's going to be multiple stakeholders involved, both on the customer side and on inside of an organization, looking at maybe 3-6 month buying processes, lengthy time with procurement, finance, legal, and so on, and then a multiple month period of implementation and setup. And it might take 9 months before end users ever get their hands on a product. And now what's happening is that kind of buying experience is being turned on its head. End users are going out and discovering products that they think are going to make themselves or their teams more effective. They're finding those products, landing on their websites, signing up and trying them out themselves. They're often putting in real work into setting up products without any sort of financial commitment, no price point at that point, because most of these products have a free trial or freemium offering. They're buying, the initial buying process might be via self-serve on a credit card. And then they're going to bat to their leadership, their CFO, saying, hey, we're seeing a lot of value in this tool. We want to adopt it more widely. And what's happening in this phenomenon of product-led growth is it's an end user focused buying experience. And it's, instead of thinking about growth happening as a result of sales or marketing or very manual and resource intensive activities, it's trying to take more of those activities and bringing them into the product experience, which can provide a really consistent customer experience and can be really scalable, right? Because once you set it up, you're not paying, on you're not having to pay armies of people to go kind of do repetitive activities. It's all built into the product.
Sounds very easy, but
much harder in practice.
Exactly. We've been doing product-led growth sort of in Partner Insight ourselves. No, it's not trivial to pull this off. But at the same time, I think what is interesting last year, right, in one of your blog posts, you mentioned age of connected work, right? And I think just yesterday I was talking with a company which is not doing any direct sort of sales motion. They only sell either through marketplaces or through partners. Can you talk a little bit more about how do you see what is the main trends, how product-led growth is evolving in the age of connected work?
It's been something we've been thinking about a lot. Essentially, product-led growth has become a very hot term. A lot of folks are looking for ways to incorporate it in their business. So we're thinking, what comes next? What's after product-led growth, or what's the next evolution look like? How can companies stand out, right? If everyone has a free version, everyone has a self-service experience, how can you continue to innovate? And what we're realizing is, the average company has dozens, if not hundreds, of software tools, right? Those often live independently. They they've been maybe big investments. You have your Salesforce around CRM and the sales tech stack. You've got HubSpot investment or other kind of core marketing technologies. You've got core investments around cloud infrastructure with AWS or GCP or Azure. You've got all these kind of big purchases, and they're cloud-based products. And increasingly, that next generation of companies is going to be built kind of extending on that value proposition, which is going to be in a way that actually means you're able to distribute the products in the context of where your users are already spending time. So you're not asking users to learn a new user experience or have to go log in to get another app when they've already got dozens of apps to log into. You're kind of extending on the workflow where they already live. You're able to get value more quickly because you're able to build off of places where data already resides and folks are already actively working. And you can potentially play the role of connecting systems and create a lot of stickiness in the user workflow as part of that. So in our mind, this age of connected work concept is saying we're all already adopting a ton of software products, but it actually is not fully productive yet because it's a disconnected experience. We want to bring these together into something that is actually seamless, built for end users, and turns all of that technology into actual business value.
I promise not to dig too deep on partnerships, but I'm gonna ask you about a couple of changes that you articulated in your recent newsletters and in blog posts about this age of connected works. One of them that I found sort of fascinating is that building for openness, and you mentioned that companies need to build for openness. Can you elaborate on that?
It kind of goes back to this concept that I mentioned around this age of connected work, connected systems, and it's all about openness and interconnectivity. And maybe I'll kind of like just bring in some examples to help demonstrate what I'm thinking of. So let's say you're an e-commerce company, you've made core investments on Shopify, right? That's kind of the core foundation for how you're going to grow the business. Shopify has a fairly open ecosystem strategy. They have a massive marketplace. In fact, more of their revenue comes from merchant solutions rather than selling their core software in the first place. So Shopify has this extremely open attitude towards technology vendors because they know that actually builds a whole ecosystem of sort of stickiness and solves a lot of problems for customers that Shopify is just not going to have the bandwidth to build all themselves. But from an ecosystem partner standpoint, it means that if they can get connected into that Shopify ecosystem and distribute through the Shopify App Store, customers can essentially take all of the upfront setup work that they've done in Shopify and starting to sell products that way. And they can essentially translate all of that hard work into immediate value on incremental products that they buy. So if they now want to buy email marketing tools, if they want to buy SMS sort of related software technology, if they want to buy technology around job shipping and referrals, all of that can extend upon the data, the setup, their kind of all of their existing systems in Shopify. So there's openness both from a Shopify perspective and from a vendor perspective of folks that are distributing through Shopify as their core partner. And it's this openness that allows for customers to I think realize the magic of product-led growth because it's really all about removing friction from that user experience in order to get value even faster for a customer.
Actually, I wrote a case study on Shopify some time ago, and I realized that Shopify back then when they started, they prioritized API and kind of this ecosystem approach pretty much from the very beginning. So they won against their competitors in terms of quality of API they exposed, and developers wanted to work with them because of that, and so on. So thank you for sharing your insights. Going back to what you just said, which I found very interesting, talking about going where customers are. There's two ways to do that. Well, I mean, there's many ways to do that, but like two prominent ways to do that. One of them is to go to marketplaces and sort of third-party platforms like Shopify, for example. And another one would be, I think you mentioned Grammarly in one of your talks, which is working sort of everywhere, right? In browser and in other sort of embedded applications. From your standpoint, where do you see companies are tilting, or like how they are sort of utilizing those motions today?
It starts with understanding who your user is and where they're spending time and what systems they're already using. And so if you're selling into for instance, a knowledge worker, they tend to spend a lot of their time in the browser, and in particular in Google Chrome. And if you can distribute through the Chrome sort of extension and Chrome ecosystem marketplace, then you're able to provide something that works really wherever your users are working. They're not having to consciously decide whether to log in or to the product or not. The product just happens to work wherever they need it. And that's, I think, the power of Grammarly, which is at its core a Chrome extension. Obviously, they have a lot of extensions and they sort of work wherever people write. But with Grammarly, the idea is let's help people just write much better and in a seamless way instead of just having spell check or autocorrect. Like that, let's actually help people write in a way that's compelling. And people are writing in a lot of different places, right? So you're not just writing in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, but those are certainly two places that you could be writing. You might be writing emails in Gmail. You might be writing inside of other software applications like an Asana or, you name it. And so Grammarly, by living essentially within Chrome, within your browser, they're going to help you improve your writing anywhere that you need that help. And they're going to do that without you having to remember to log into Grammarly, right? If you had to seek out Grammarly anytime you needed help with writing something, you'd probably just not go through that extra pain unless it was something really important. But because Grammarly is just sort of natively embedded where you already are, it's something that gets you value really quickly. It gets sticky, kind of repeatable usage and habit formation from the user, and just doesn't require a whole lot of friction for their user experience. But this looks different for a lot of different companies, right? So there's the Chrome extension, and kind of Chrome marketplace is a very popular place for folks to distribute products. But you could also look at the App Store for products that are distributed over mobile, and that's an increasingly popular place even for B2B products. Shopify App Store, kind of building on top of Shopify. If you're in e-commerce, the list actually goes on. I know that even Atlassian, for example, has a very massive Atlassian App Store. A lot of the large tech companies do, and so if you're or like AWS has a very large marketplace as well. Depending on your persona, it might be really compelling to tap into that ecosystem because you're going to just be able to provide a better product that actually can utilize product-led growth without a whole lot of disruptive behavior change expected from your users.
This leads very nicely to another question that I had is around sort of on the opposite side, right? So when companies embed in someone else's software, those software can start monetizing indirectly as well. And this is like a pretty big trend across the industry to embed in and monetizing, not necessarily even like your own product, but monetizing some customer either workflow or data or anything else. Can you talk a little bit more on that?
You called it out. Yeah, it's there's a lot of benefits to doing that from a kind of large software vendor standpoint of having that marketplace allowing easy connectivity, and then being able to monetize indirectly as part of that. My experience, just given where we sit, so I work at a VC firm. We invest in earlier stage companies, often Series A, Series B. These are not the companies that yet, have the market power and the customer base where they're building out their own marketplaces. So they're more on the side that is distributing through other folks' marketplaces. But I mean, to me, the rationale as a vendor is pretty obvious, right? Your customers, you have a massive install base of customers. They have very diverse needs that might be different across industries or personas. Your product has become core to how they operate. And so they want to extend how they're using it to get even more business value from the product. And that could mean a roadmap that could be an infinitely long roadmap. And so you could go build a product engineering org that's massive and a huge percentage of your revenue to build all of those things. But a much more efficient way would be to have a more open ecosystem approach, partner with other ISVs and developers where you might have your own first party apps, and then your partners could distribute apps to the App Store. And that way you're really allowing faster innovation. You're allowing the market to see what folks really value and they want. And so you're able to provide, I think, more solutions to customers in a faster way. And you're able to be efficient because you're not having to spend as much money building out your R&D team in-house. You can benefit essentially from third-party R&D on your platform. And then there's still a really powerful monetization opportunity through charging as a percentage of revenue or through other avenues, because you're getting a rake on any of these purchases happening through your platform. And then what can be powerful is your vendors might even start bringing you customers, right? Or your customers are going to be sticky. It's going to be very hard for them to leave and go to another platform, because not only are they using your software, they're using a host of apps around your software, which just means that it's going to be extremely difficult for them to replicate that experience elsewhere, or might take a lot of time for them to do it. So, I mean, a lot of benefits, but it also is something that requires a pretty dedicated investment to go do this well. Building a developer-friendly, API-first business with partners is extremely different from building a direct-to-customer business that sells your software products firsthand. It's almost like building kind of two businesses within one.
Totally. I wrote a case study on Slack, and Slack made this decision pretty early on as well, right? To be a platform effectively, to build an ecosystem around it. And surprisingly, when Salesforce acquired Slack, the valuation was, I think, 10x difference between Slack and Salesforce at the time of acquisition. But the number of developers in the community was only 2 times difference. So like Slack has so many people engaged in the ecosystem was really incredible. Thank you so much for sharing that. The question that probably a lot of people who think about partnerships or ecosystem or platform even sort of asking themselves is it's not if question, it's when question, right? And I think it would be interesting to hear your opinion. When is this sort of good time, or like what is this maybe like signals of the good time to start thinking about it, or maybe like testing some approaches? Because I think you are at the point when in OpenView you see so many companies, right, in your portfolio and around your ecosystem. When they think it's a good time, is it like to start thinking about it? Is it at Series A? Is it before? Is it after? Like,
well, it's going to be different depending on the company, and it goes back to where your users spend time and what's going to be the best way to reach them. I mean, there are some companies, so I would say, especially on the Shopify App Store example, there are some companies where they know from really the very beginning that core to their strategy is going to be a close partnership with Shopify and distributing through Shopify and through Shopify partners. And that's just, that is their focus from day one. It's also a great way to build a wedge, right? Because they can focus on one e-commerce platform, all of the integrations, sort of making that experience as seamless as possible, scaling within that kind of core ICP, and then maybe they can replicate that to the other e-commerce platforms as they reach scale and they want to diversify and kind of reduce the platform risk. But there's going to be a lot of nuances across companies, and so it's really hard to pinpoint when is the right time to do it. In my mind, for a lot of companies, it can be core to how they go to market kind of from the very beginning. And so if that's true, you really want to start thinking about it maybe even before you monetize. And then there's going to be other folks where this partnership motion is actually more about extending something that's already worked at a direct level and that they've gotten it into repeatable fashion, right? So they found a way to build a product that people love and find a scalable way to reach those folks. Maybe they're at kind of Series C, Series D at that point, but looking for incremental channels to layer on to inflect even faster growth at scale. And so if you're not doing it as kind of core to that business model and it's more about secondary drivers, I see it as something that where you want to wait until you have that kind of product go to market fit before you start trying to layer on too many incremental channels and growth levers.
Very good point. Very good point. We did episode with Daniel from Atlassian. He worked in Atlassian before, and we talk about how partners potentially can help this sort of product-led growth motion in general. And I think his insight was that partners actually can give you almost like 10x of feedback, right? So if you build in products and do sort of product-led growth, you trying to get feedback and trying to see like what sticks and like how you would improve the product to generate more sort of retention or like adoption and so on. And I think partners, if you're a company which is working with partners, you can get a lot of feedback from partners, not only in scale but in terms of quality as well. It's sort of unique and so on. So what do you think about it? Do you see companies actually, in your experience or like in your portfolio, are they trying to get feedback from partners as a way to improve the product?
It's hard to define this because of all the nuances and variety involved. What I would say is there are certainly a number of companies where channel partners, and I'm specifically thinking about like reseller kinds of partners or agency types of partners in this case, where that's a really efficient way to reach the end customer, right? So if you're selling a solution around IT management to SMBs, an SMB might have an IT person in-house that buys those products, but oftentimes they actually have an MSP, managed service provider, outsourced IT. And so if you could sell to the MSP, you can actually potentially reach all of their customers, right? But you're selling to one person who can become an expert in your product and can and once you sold that one deal, you've sold not just to one customer, but to all of their customers and to any new customer that they're going to deploy to. So it can be a really efficient way to grow. And you also have that one entity that essentially is collecting all of that insight from across their customer base, distilling it based on kind of their expertise, and then sharing that with you. And so anything that comes through, filtered through that process, you already know, hey, this isn't just one-off feedback from one customer that might be different from all of my other customers. This is from someone that's really put the time and effort into my product and is committed. And so you could normally trust it a lot more and put more stock into it. But for software companies, for a lot of times when you're early on, and I'm thinking in particularly around Series A, Series B, it's hard to have both a direct to customer motion and that channel or agency partner motion and have them both humming at the same time. Like HubSpot, for instance, didn't add their agency partner program until a little bit later on. And so it's not impossible, but a lot of times my focus tends to be, let's find where we're going to find that best traction initially, whether that's a direct model or a partner related model. Let's nail that, scale it, and then we'll find those incremental channels. And that way you're not diluting your efforts and kind of trying to build out two different teams and two different motions and get two different kinds of feedback from customers when you are too early to have found that kind of repeatable motion that you can scale. And so then you're really just diluting your efforts by and not nailing one thing.
I think you're right. So it's you either partner focused from the beginning, right? Like companies like CrowdStrike, for example, they've been doing it through partners, or you're trying to get your foot in the door in the market, sort of product market fit, and then you try to expand through partners. Some companies like uh, Airtable or like Asana, they tend to find some partner feeds with Atlassian, by the way, as well. But you're right. So you need to figure out how do you get direct feedback from customers, probably first, and then probably like scale it through partners and improve it. Awesome. Look, you've been recently writing about product-led growth and sales, and I would love to maybe like us touch on that a little bit, and then I think we would end our discussion with communities, because I think it's been fascinating, like how communities are driving growth these days, right? It's also like very difficult, but still communities are becoming very prominent. So going back to product-led growth and sales, what is the trends that you've seen there? I mean, sort of apart from from partners.
One of the trend is just everyone's trying to figure out how to do both at the same time, right? There was this big battle at one point of like it's either product-led growth or it's sales. And I think what people have realized is really kind of just about every company is challenged to do both over time. And maybe you nail one first, but as you're at scale, you kind of got to do both. For PLG companies, you might have started with that end user, maybe started with a self-serve channel that's doing well, but then your self-serve users are starting to maybe call into support saying, hey, I need help with a security questionnaire. I need help with I need a contract. I'm looking at rolling this out across a wider group and my CFO has questions. And if you don't have a sales rep, you're going to often miss out on that opportunity, which, provides not the best customer experience and can also really stall your ability to grow because you want to grow from that user to team to company-wide adoption. And so for PLG companies, often it's starting with that base of PLG as the core foundation and then layering in sales to go work with those existing users in order to expand both their usage and their overall spend. And with that product-led sales approach, I think that the nuance for me is that you're selling to someone that is already using your product often, or to an account at least that's already using your product, which can accelerate the sales process, right? You don't have to qualify them, demo to them, right? You're working with someone that maybe is already advocating for you, and you can kind of partner with that power user or champion inside of an account. And it's also something where you have a lot more data to bear on this process. So you know who's using the product, how they're using the product, when usage is growing, when usage is shrinking, all of the different users in an account. You should ideally be able to leverage that data to sell to the right accounts at the right time and in a way that's personalized to how they use the product. That's easier to say than it is to actually do in reality, but that you can actually unlock this personalized buying experience because you have the data to then personalize the experience. The other thing that I would say is for these PLG companies, you need to have an enterprise grade product that you can sell, right? So you don't want to layer in sales without having that incremental product that you can sell that is just, frankly better than the self-serve product experience, like that gives folks a reason why they should be engaging with sales in the first place. And then you also need to make sure the incentives are right because you could layer on a sales rep that customer could buy self-serve. So do you give sales credit on that? Or is it a self-serve deal? Like there can be a lot of friction points and channel conflict between the two. The final thing I'd say is a lot of PLG companies start with that end user and solve for, the end user who's going to actually adopt the product. But when you start getting into enterprise selling in larger accounts, that power user might not be the one who can write the check. And so you're often multi-threading in an account, asking for an intro to the decision maker, trying to educate the decision maker what's the business value that you're generating for them. And that can actually just be, it sounds straightforward to traditional software companies. Like that's just normally core to how selling software works. But for PLG companies, that's not baked into the DNA. Messaging on the website doesn't speak to that kind of ROI-based message for the decision maker. you might not have have any sort of account-based marketing to get to the decision maker beyond, sales touch points. And so it's all things that PLG companies essentially need to learn over time in order to get good at this motion. But then for sales-led companies, it's actually normally layering in a PLG motion uh, to broaden their addressable market opportunity and improve the customer experience, but doing that in a way that doesn't create too much conflict, right? Because as soon as they introduce a freemium edition, for example, sales reps might hate that because all of a sudden these folks that would have to, contact sales and do a demo might just start using the product, which might be an opportunity that they miss out on, at least in the short term. And so there can be a lot of challenges, I guess, in my mind, going from product led to then adding sales is a little bit easier than going from traditional kind of sales approach and then adding PLG, but there's complexities on both sides.
Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I think they're sort of going into the converging in the same space almost, right? I think product-led companies have to be better in product because otherwise people will not adopt it at all. People who could sort of come in from sales are better in sales, but they still, I mean, I think this is sort of equalizing each other now in the market. I think product-led companies creating much better standards in terms of like quality of the product. But I think what I found very insightful in what you said is that like real value actually is unlocking enterprises and teams, right? So like real value in terms of like getting to large volume of sales, large evaluation, and so on. You have to unlock selling to teams, it's selling to enterprises, and this is like not trivial. And this is interesting segue to maybe like a decent question related to cloud marketplaces. You mentioned AWS and GCP, obviously Azure, and so on. I think what they've done really well, they found a way to streamline the selling experience for procurement department, right? And I think this is like their big value proposition. And I think now they added like partners and they created like private offers, so you can actually sell non-standard terms. But I'm sort of curious, what do you make of this just explosion of this hyperscalers?
Probably hard to comment overly on that. I think from a vendor standpoint, if I go back to that startup mentality, if you were trying to sell to a customer and deploy, on their AWS, like as part of their AWS sort of purchase and maybe deploy on their cloud, it might be a lot of work to navigate all of the different kind of buying processes of selling into a large enterprise. But ultimately the purchase that you're trying to get the customer to make might be a six-figure purchase, but it's like a fraction of the customer spend on AWS as a whole. And so if you could instead sort of sell as part of that same AWS broader agreement that's kind of already signed off, already approved, maybe as part of that already committed spend that the customer has made, you can turbocharge that sales cycle by potentially 2 or 3 months, and really get in, prove value, and then grow with that customer. And so I think it's a really interesting opportunity for companies that sell into that developer and IT persona to try to basically ride off of the coattails of the big cloud vendors, and use that as a way to get into enterprise customers in a way that's much more efficient than trying to sell each of these customers one by one.
No, I totally agree with you. I think that the big caveat is that expectations should be managed appropriately, because I think a lot of companies feel that if they list on marketplaces, they will get discovered a lot. But this is not it's not the value proposition of big marketplaces yet. I think they will probably grow, but now you still need to bring your own basically client and would say, hey, here's my product, here's the easy way to buy it through your existing contract, like I said.
Totally. Discovery is so it's a fascinating thing on marketplaces. There are some marketplaces that are really great at kind of driving discovery of the apps on their marketplace. I would say the cloud giants are probably not so great at that. Maybe there's just too much noise, too many of them. oftentimes like where you're going to be able to drive that discovery is if your product solves a strategic gap for that vendor that their customers are asking for, right? So if customers are starting to churn because a vendor doesn't have X, right? Or if getting X is key for that large vendor to unlock a big opportunity within a customer, you're going to be your app is going to be really strategic to them. And so that's where if you can be in that position where you're strategic, that big vendor is going to actually be very incentivized to bring you into deals, to do co-marketing with you, to feature you in their content in their events, in their community, and so on. And so you can, you know, if you're in the right place at the right time with the right product, you can drive a lot of discovery through those larger vendors.
100% agree. Did you happen to have any examples from your portfolio?
One company I featured in Growth Unhinged, my newsletter, is a company called Supermetrics, which initially was a kind of a data connector built off of Google Sheets for marketers, right? It's now a much broader product that can connect data across a lot of different systems. But one of the initial pain points was you've got, as a marketer, you've got data that lives in a lot of different systems. You might have ad data that lives in Facebook. You might have Google Analytics data from your website. You might have email data that lives in your HubSpot instance. And so for marketers to kind of bring that all into one place, and often as they wanted that destination to be Google Sheets, it was a lot of like manual copying and pasting every week, every month. And you wanted just all of that data to be fed into one source and automated. So it was accurate, you had it when you needed it, it was consistent, and it saved you time. And so with Supermetrics, they could actually become very strategic for players like Google, because Google wasn't going to be able to build super close integrations with their sworn enemies, right? With the Facebooks of the world. But so a neutral vendor that could play the role of connector between different parties could actually end up making Google's ecosystem much more valuable and drive more folks maybe into Google Sheets or into using Google Analytics or that suite of Google products. And so to me, that's a good example of kind of being in that right place at the right time. I think they also were one of the first vendors that launched as part of Google's Workspace marketplace. And so they've kind of benefited from taking a bet on a marketplace that wasn't yet proven, that didn't have a whole lot of customers, but where they could be early. And then, because they were early, kind of get that halo from being a first to market leader.
Great example. Great example. Knowing that we only have limited time, I would love us maybe like to wrap up on the topic of communities and sort of ecosystems, and specifically of communities, right? I think communities could be very powerful, and you wrote about communities a lot, but at the same time, communities as a topic and focus probably have been overused to some extent. I would love your maybe like the latest take on where we are in terms of companies using communities. What is the best practice, and what would be your advice for companies sort of in 2023?
Well, it is a buzzword, right? A lot of people talk about community, but what they actually mean is very different depending on the company. There's so many different varieties of a community strategy. There's also a lot of folks that, have a community orientation or a desire for a community strategy, but don't see a whole lot of outcomes around that they can attach to the community strategy. So in my mind, there's a few different flavors for PLG companies. One is, again, finding where your users already are, where they're already spending time, and being active in those communities. So if we again go back to that e-commerce and Shopify example, if you're distributing through Shopify on that app store, there's actually a much broader community within Shopify that you can tap into. There's a number of Shopify agencies and partners, Shopify related events and meetups. Go be present within those communities before you start looking to kind of build your own first party community, because that you're going to be able to take advantage of infrastructure that's already there and that kind of core party's credibility. You're going to have a bigger kind of impact in a shorter period of time if you do that. But then there's a lot of different nuances as you kind of move up from there to start building out that first party community. And I think of it back to like, who is your user and what do they need to be successful? So there's some companies that are in newer categories, or have a new kind of way of operating that's very forward thinking, and where they have a belief that the market for what they're doing is going to be growing over time, and that people need help figuring it out. And they want to connect with peers, they want to learn best practices. Software vendors can play that role of that kind of category creator. And I think HubSpot did an amazing job with this, with that concept of inbound marketing, which wasn't just things that they wrote about, but communities they built around how to do inbound marketing. You started seeing job postings, right, for inbound marketing. In the PLG space, I'm a big fan of Pocus, which is a product-led sales software company, because of their product-led sales community, which is on Slack. They have, I think, bi-weekly virtual meetups with experts in their community. They're really great about featuring any of those insights from those meetups and kind of turning them back into content that are then valuable for everyone in the community. And it's one of those things where we're all trying to figure out how to do PLG in sales. Sales leaders are figuring it out. Product folks are figuring it out. And so Pocus gets to play that interesting role of connector and facilitator, which is just so valuable right now. And that is not going to be as valuable for a company that's selling into a category that already exists, right? With a persona that's already very well, very mature, and isn't looking for that kind of guidance, or already has plenty of resources out there. The final thing I would say is what's a final sort of trend that I've observed for 2023, and I'd also count this as a trend from the last couple of years. So communities are often great, or media companies, I should say, are great at building a community, building an audience, doing it very efficiently, not spending a lot of money on it, right? Media companies historically aren't great at monetizing, but they have a lot of trust, independence, neutrality, and they can build a very large and trusted audience. Software companies, on the other hand, are great at monetizing, but not so great at building audiences, community, thinking long term, right? And so we've seen a number of instances of software companies either partnering with or even acquiring communities in their space that are really core to that persona. Like Pendo and Mind the Product is a great recent example. I might even think of like Paddle and Profitwell. Profitwell is obviously more than just a community, but I think of it as that kind of example where there's really interesting kind of synergy between those two kinds of companies. And so I find that something that I'm expecting to see more of over the next couple of years.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing great examples. And I totally agree that software companies tend to be much better in building software community. Sort of media companies have additional value and that's why all these acquisitions happening. I think HubSpot acquired
The Hustle.
yeah, and then so on. I would love us to wrap up on the question. What are you excited about 2023, and what are the things that's coming along in your newsletter, which is Growth Unhinged, and also in OpenView, you building communities and stuff like that. Can you talk a little bit more what's kind of keeps you up at night for 2023?
I mean, the market keeps changing, so there's always a reason to kind of go out, observe what's going on, try to kind of figure things out and help folks through it, and kind of share perspectives on it. And see, my focus and our broader focus is trying to meet with the companies that are innovating, like doing interesting things on the bleeding edge, but have something that, have a playbook that a lot of other people could learn from, and trying to take those insights and share them back. And so that we kind of get stronger as a community about understanding how to do product-led growth and just how to find modern ways of building great software businesses. And so we're doing that in a few ways. I mean, on Growth Unhinged, most of the newsletter is about finding experts out there and being able to tell their stories. But then we also launched an OpenView, a PLG mastermind community, which is a cohort-based community for early-stage founders that are all thinking about how to set up and optimize their product-led growth motion. And we have sessions for them around the core principles of PLG. And we brought in outside experts to kind of facilitate those with both initially kind of some best practices and training, but then just broader kind of knowledge sharing, trading notes, and community discussions, so that early stage founders who are really kind of in their own company, seeing that perspective about their specific product, they can have access to this broader group of people that are at non-competitive products and companies that are actually going through the exact same process as they are.
I really appreciate you sharing all of these insights. I love following you on LinkedIn. I think you've been doing a lot of sort of sharing snippets of information, but your newsletter is just really fantastic. So I would really recommend everyone to subscribe and connect with you as well.
Appreciate it, Roman.
Our sponsor is Partner Insight, your AI co-pilot to grow your partnerships 3x faster. Onboard and collaborate with partners from one shared platform. Seamlessly exchange and track deals, content, and data. Use AI to automate engagements, track progress, create reports, or answer frequent partner questions. Try Partner Insight for free.